Hello, everyone. Do we have any dads in the audience? Okay, a couple. This is directed at you guys. I hope I don't offend too many of you, because today we're going to be talking about lawns and their environmental impact, so we'll see where that goes. Now, when you think of sustainability, what do you think of? Probably using sustainable energies or buying sustainable fruits and vegetables. But one thing you might not think of is getting rid of the hallmark of suburban life, your lawn. The lawn we all know and love is one of the worst things you can do for the environment, and is one of the least mentioned also in terms of environmental impact. Lawns in themselves have a devastating environmental impact on a local and national level, and are really rather emblematic of a greater cultural issue with how we relate to the natural world. So, what's so bad about lawns anyways? They don't look so bad, do they? Well, let's consider everyone's favorite pollinator, bees. Bees of all species are on the decline across the United States, and one of the biggest reasons for this is habitat loss. Now, when you think of habitat loss, you might think of rainforest deforestation or ice caps melting. But what you probably don't think of is the lawn right outside your door. A lot of people chipping in amounts to quite a bit. 40 million acres of land dedicated to turf grass. I think that counts as quite a bit. That's roughly 2% of grass in the continental United States, 3 times more than any other irrigated crop in the US. The flowers and trees that provide vital habitat and sustenance for pollinators are cleared en masse to create room for lawns. And as living space disappears, so do the pollinators, the thing that maintains everything from forests to food crops. The thing about lawns is while they may appear green and flourishing, they are, for all intents and purposes, ecologically dead. A lawn is a monoculture, a green desert devoid of the biodiversity needed to sustain greater ecosystems. The ecological ramifications of this are devastating. A study at the National Science Foundation of 6 of America's largest cities found that specifically lawn maintenance is a major contributor to continental-scale ecological homogenization. To simplify that, having lawns is a major factor in the loss of biodiversity all across the continental United States and beyond. Biodiversity is necessary to maintain resilience in an era of increasing changes. A loss of biodiversity inhibits resistance to especially climate change by depriving an area of the ability to adapt to changes that it hasn't dealt with before. Already, in certain parts of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, loss in biodiversity is resulting in the collapse of traditional food systems and results in economic and human losses. If the current patterns of biodiversity loss continue, something similar is not so unrealistic here either, especially given the precariousness of American agriculture, which I'll address in a minute. Furthermore, to sustain an artificial expanse of perfectly trimmed green, a lot of maintenance is needed. This means pesticides, fertilizer, and truly preposterous amounts of water. The amount of pesticides and fertilizer applied to lawns is truly staggering. 67 million pounds of pesticides are applied to lawns annually. As for fertilizer, 10 times the amount of fertilizer is applied annually to lawns per acre than to actual food crops. These products are primarily petrochemicals, synthesized from crude oil. These means that their use releases compounds like nitrous oxide and methane, greenhouse gases 300 times more potent than CO2. When it rains, these chemicals wash into nearby waterways, where they poison animals, contaminate drinking water, and cause a condition called eutrophication, in which a body of water is filled with excess nutrients, leading to algal blooms and busts, and eventually sucking all of the oxygen out of a body of water. This can be seen, for instance, in the Gulf of Mexico, where there's a dead zone almost as large as New York. It's estimated that runoff from fertilizer alone costs about $157 billion annually, making them expensive as well as hazardous to the environment. Pesticides in particular have the added threat of non-discriminatory killing. Studies have linked residential pesticide use to marked declines in populations of indigenous bats, frogs, and other pollinators, all of which not only keep ecosystems intact, but have benefits for humans as well. Right now, Americans use 90 million pounds of fertilizer and 78 million pounds of pesticides just to sustain lawns, specifically. Interestingly enough, most of that never even serves its intended purpose. The EPA estimates that the majority of pesticide and fertilizer used is wasted because of mistimed application. All that amounts to a lot of damage and expense for relatively little benefit. As for water, lawns in the US use 3 trillion gallons of water yearly, or about 200 gallons of water per person. In areas of the world, both arid and fertile, the excessive use of water, primarily for lawns, has resulted in the depletion of aquifers, which are needed primarily as the source of irrigation for food and cash crops. All in all, lawns are a waste of valuable resources that could be put to better use. These wasteful practices also bear a cost in terms of climate change as well. Annually, the gas to mow lawns amounts to about 600 million gallons in the United States, in addition to the untold millions of gallons for pesticides and fertilizers and other petrochemicals. 17 million of these gallons are wasted annually due to accidental spillages, according to EPA estimates. That accounts for more lost gas than the Exxon Valdez spill. Simply using a gas-powered mower for just 1 hour generates roughly as much air pollution as driving a car for 350 miles. Accounting for 54 million Americans, that's roughly 5% of American emissions. The damage caused by sustaining this wasteful and minimally useful practice from the combined impacts of habitat loss, greenhouse gas emissions, and dependence on oil is emblematic of a greater syndrome in American society. The reason is that lawns are merely a microcosm of greater societal issues. The way our society relates to the greater natural world is broken on a fundamental level, whether we like it or not. Humanity and our society is dependent on local ecosystems in an irreversible way, from the food we eat, to the air we breathe, to the ground we build on. However, within the last 100 years, a philosophical movement has subtly arisen in the popular consciousness, a philosophy called anthropocentrism. The philosophy of anthropocentrism operates from the paradigm that the natural world is subservient to human power and that humanity can operate independent of the natural world. These statements on their face may not seem like something many people believe in, but they are expressed, usually very, very subtly. Take, for instance, lawns. Lawns are an artificial construction that operates in defiance of how nature is intended to function, and as such harms the environment that humanity relies on for basic survival. The overuse of water and petrochemicals to sustain this unnatural and unhealthy system is a prime example of the widespread belief of human primacy over the natural world. However, on a large scale, this belief system can be even more dangerous. For another prime example, look at agriculture in America, especially corn, America's largest crop, according to the US Department of Agriculture. Right now, that crop is in danger of collapse. The same mistakes made in residential lawn are also made in our food supply. The same wasteful practices, the same overuse and abuse of resources, the same mindset that creates the excesses of lawns applies to where our food comes from too. That's the reason the Corn Belt, which supplies 75% of the nation's corn, has lost 35% of the region's topsoil, rendering that land unusable for agriculture of any kind. The loss of topsoil and arable land is just one of the many problems resulting from a disconnect with how the natural world functions. What is needed more than anything is simply a change in philosophy to embrace ecocentrism, which positions humanity as the partner of the natural world, not a master. It is a way of looking at things that views what is best for the environment as what is best for humanity too. And as a guiding philosophy, on a civilizational level, it works. Historically, civilizations that live in sync with the natural world, especially in terms of agriculture, have thrived longer than ones that didn't. This is the reason the Mayan Empire collapsed some 600 years before the Aztec Empire did, because they were not in sync with the natural world. Rather than living disconnected with the processes of the natural world, culturally we ought to embrace systems that function in tandem with natural forces, such as ecologically sound land use. While it sounds hippie-ish, it is proven to create a more successful, sustainable, and prosperous society. So, what can you do about it? Well, some people have transformed their lawns into rock gardens or so-called food forests. But such measures aren't necessary to transform your lawn from waste to sustainability. One of the easiest and most effective things you can do to create a sustainable lawn is to let it grow over with ground covers, weeds like dandelions and clover. While these are often considered undesirable and labeled with the term weed, these plants are very good at replenishing soil and provide much needed resources for native pollinators. In fact, in some areas of the country, these supply most of the needs of native pollinators because other sources have been so depleted by habitat destruction. And they have really, in some sense, become a bulwark against collapse of bee colonies, especially. They can thrive on their own with minimal human intervention and can grow without the fertilizers, pesticides, and watering that sustain traditional lawn grasses. And look pretty to boot, too. They thrive in ways that grass simply cannot, because they are better adapted to survival in a world that, frankly, is not suited to vast swaths of green. Another effective way of limiting the damage lawns do to biodiversity is to limit how much you mow your lawn. That's not to say you let it grow 4 feet high, but studies have shown that only cutting your lawn every 2 to 3 weeks actually boosts biodiversity and abundance of pollinator species. Being a, quote, lazy lawnmower, as the EPA phrases it, was the ideal, according to the study for promoting biodiversity in your yard. The key takeaway here, we're all part of the problem, but that also means we can all be part of the solution. Thank you.